Hello and welcome to game 551 of CCC9's quarterfinals. I mentioned in the previous video that there are two games here that I wanted to review. Both played against Stockfish and both brilliant. And I really hope that you like the first one. Well, this is now the second one where Leela is black. And the game started out with d4, g6, c4, bishop g7, and now after knight c3 and d6, we reached the end of the book. And in this position, Stockfish went for the Averbakh system with e4. And this setup looks now a lot like a King's Indian defense. And indeed, Black's most popular options here are all in connection with breaking the white center with e5, trying to exchange these pawns and gain access to the dark squares, or make this pawn move forward or take, and then c5 becomes available for that knight. And here Black can play e5 immediately, and after d5, well, this is a King's Indian setup. Or Black can play first knight f6, as Stockfish expected Leela to do in this game. And now after knight f3, castles, bishop e2 or h3, and e5, we are in the orthodox variation of the King's Indian. Also, instead of knight f6, Black can also play knight c6 here to provoke this pawn forward. And after that, knight d4 might look tempting, but it's not really good for Black. White can force that knight to exchange itself with moves like bishop e3 and knight e2. And Black didn't really achieve much. Much better is to play knight b4 and reroute this knight to c5. But after e4, instead of going for a King's Indian structure with e5, Leela went for c5. And here now after d5, we went into a Benoni-like structure. And this is a bit of an inferior structure, quite simply because after e5 and d5, White has this break with c5, threatening to open the c file and make this d6 pawn weak. But this is less dangerous for a king castled on the king side than a Benoni-like structure where Black plays c5, and now after d5, White has this break with e5, opening up the e file, and that is much more dangerous to the Black king. And also e5 might uncover a bishop on this diagonal, so we can see that having a pawn on e5 is safer, let's say, for a king castled on the king side. Not to mention that after e5, Black also has this option with f5, opening up the f file and attacking maybe the white king on the king side. So the King's Indian structure is a bit better than the Benoni structure, at least in theory. Of course, this doesn't mean that after e4, c5 is not playable. It's completely playable. It's just that in this Averbakh system, this move is less popular. But even our world champion Magnus Carlsen played it, so it's probably not that bad. However, now after d5, Leela played an even more surprising move than c5. She took the knight on c3. And this move wasn't played at all at Super GM level. And it's quite surprising because it looks like to be an inferior move from a positional point of view, weakening all these dark squares here. And Stockfish was now very happy in this position, but if Leela took on c3, then it's probably not such a bad move. There has to be something to it. And taking into consideration that she actually won this game, well, this idea needs to be analyzed further. And now after b takes on c3, Leela continued with knight f6. She attacks this pawn on e4. The light squared bishop defends, and now we have e5. This pawn is blocking the e4 pawn and not allowing this bishop to come alive. And Stockfish could take on e6, but that would pretty much ruin his center here and weaken the e5 square. And not only that, with the pawn on e5, we can see that the e6 square is not available for Black, and neither is the e5 square. There's a pawn, but Black would be maybe happier with a piece there. Whereas if this pawn takes on e6, then after bishop takes, knight e2 and knight c6, this knight is going to e5, and black suddenly would have two very strong pieces in the center, and he would be attacking this pawn on c4. Taking on c4 after, let's say, castles and knight e5, taking here on c4 is not yet possible because of this queen a4 check, and the queen would win down that piece. But after short castles, Leela could seriously think about capturing this pawn on c4. And if instead of castling here after knight c6, white would prevent this knight from getting to e5 with f4, well, then the e4 pawn is weak, and after queen e7, castles and long castles, Leela could seriously think about attacking the c4 pawn. And white's center is still not looking very pretty. Leela would have a lot of counterplay in this position. Rook e8 could come and so on. So after e5, Stockfish considered that taking here on e6 is not best. And he has this idea with bishop h6, trying to prevent Leela from castling, but this now would fail because of knight e4. And after bishop takes, there would be queen h4 attacking both bishops simultaneously, and black would win a pawn. So here, instead of bishop h6, Stockfish played h4, and now queen h4 obviously doesn't work, so maybe bishop h6, but Leela just calmly played here queen e7, and she says bishop h6 still not good, and she's right, because now after bishop h6 there could come knight g4, attacking this bishop, and if bishop g7 then rook g8, and that bishop would be dead. And after bishop d2 there's f5, and this position is really not worse for black. After something like f3 there's knight f6, and then black can take twice here, and black's position is not worse. So Stockfish, instead of bishop h6, played here knight e2, and now after knight d7 he actually played f3, taking away g4 from the knight, and now bishop h6 finally would be good, but now Leela rules it out with h5 and not allowing this bishop here. But Stockfish played now bishop g5, very logical move, pinning this knight to the queen and having a very strong influence down this diagonal, and Leela doesn't have a dark squared bishop to counter that, so this bishop here looks like a monster. But Leela says, I know a way to unpin and push your bishop back, and she played here queen f8. And now after rook b1, attacking down the b7 pawn, she played knight h7, and she sent the bishop back to d2, and now she played queen e7 again. But Stockfish's dark squared bishop is very stubborn, and he went back again to h6, to which Leela said, okay, fine, you won, I won't castle short, and she just moved the king to d8. But now Stockfish immediately developed the queen to b3, attacking down this b file, basically saying to that king that you can hide but you can't run. You can run but you can't hide. I will catch you and turn you into meatloaf. But Leela's king is fearless, and she just went to c7, defending this pawn on b7. Having achieved his goal, Stockfish's dark squared bishop now recentralizes himself to e3, and now we have rook g8. Is Leela planning to expand with g5? Well, that's probably less likely, since h5 would be weak, but f5 would be a really good idea, because now if white would take here, then this rook would be ready to eat the g2 pawn. So Stockfish stopped that idea immediately with knight g3 by controlling the f5 square. And now Leela played the heart-stopping a5, weakening not only the b6 square but also the b5 square around his black king. Has she gone mad? Does she want to lose the game? Well, we'll see. Stockfish played here queen a4, and now we have knight b6 trying to push the queen back. If the queen goes to b5, then there's rook a6 defending the knight, and then bishop d7 would push the queen backwards anyway. So Stockfish preferred to move back deliberately. And now we have knight d7, rook b5, a4 to save the pawn, queen b2, and now even a3. And here now after queen b3 and rook e8, Stockfish played king f2. He's preparing rook b1 and then striking at b7. Is Leela's king in trouble? Are his days numbered? Important existential questions. The game continued now with rook a6, and now after rook b1, what is Leela planning? Maybe b6, maybe rook a7? Well, none of the above. Leela actually took the pawn on h4. And Stockfish is looking long at Leela here. What are you doing, girl? And he's taking on b7. And now, of course, the bishop can't take on b7, because then after queen takes on b7 and king d8, Leela would lose this rook on a6, and that's not good. So after rook takes on b7, she just played king d8. And now, since the bishop is actually threatening to take here, the rook went back to b5. Leela continued with rook g8, bishop d2, queen f6, making way for the h-pawn. And now, since this knight will have to leave, he is rerouting himself to e3. We have knight f1, h4, queen d1, queen g7, making way for a knight to get to f6, knight e3, knight h to f6, and this knight wants to come to h5, where from not only controls f4 and g3, but could also use one of them. And here after queen h1, we have rook h8, rook b3, going for the a3 pawn maybe, queen h6, walking into a nasty discovery, but this knight doesn't have good jumps right now, so the bishop goes back to c1, and now this knight is really threatening to move away since the bishop is defended, and the bishop is also attacking on a3. But Leela now played h3, and after queen takes on h3, she moved the queen back to f8, attacking the queen, and she's taking over the h-file. We have queen g3, and now knight h5 with tempo on the queen, queen h4 check, king c7, and now, since Leela is threatening knight f4 with an attack on the queen, and then taking this bishop on d3, we have bishop c2, and now knight b6 from Leela. And taking actually this pawn on a3 is not good for Stockfish, because after rook takes, Leela could continue with knight f4, attacking this queen, and after queen g3, rook takes, bishop takes. This bishop is actually out of the game. It has no business at all on the a file, and will have to move back. And later, if Leela develops this bishop from the first rank, then maybe it could also attack down the a file. So after knight b6, Stockfish continued with knight f1, and now we have knight f4, queen g3, queen h6, knight e3, and bishop d7. Taking now this pawn on a3 would be completely suicidal here for Stockfish, because after rook takes, and bishop takes, Leela would have rook a8 attacking down the a file, and rook b3 doesn't work because of bishop a4, and Stockfish would lose a lot of material here. And after bishop c1 instead, there's of course rook a2, pinning this bishop and threatening forks. And if rook b2, then the rook can take, and after bishop takes, there's bishop a4, trying to weaken this d3 square again for this fork to come. And after bishop takes and knight takes, this bishop doesn't have good squares. Of course, if it comes to c1, then there's this fork, and if it comes to a3, then this knight just simply takes here. And if it comes to a1, then there's queen a1, attacking this bishop, which is hard to defend. And if knight f1, then there's this knight d3 check, forcing the king away from f2, and then queen g1 is very strong, not allowing this king back and threatening knight f4 and then taking on g2. And if the king takes here, well, then after queen f1, the bishop will be also lost. So after bishop d7, instead of taking this pawn, Stockfish continued with bishop d2, and now we have queen g7. Here black has to be very careful not to blunder with bishop a4, because that would lose a lot of material here after bishop takes on a4. So Leela has to be careful, but queen g7, making way for the rook, is very good. And now we have rook f1, rook h5, king e1. This king is now running to the queen side, but unfortunately a lot of damage has been done already to white's position. Queen h8, the h file is taken over, king d1, rook a8, and now queen e1, but white can't really challenge black on the h file. Bishop a4, rook b1, and now knight d3. And this bishop is pinned, the queen is attacked. We have queen e2 now, and now knight b2 check. King c1, and now the bishop takes on c2 because now this queen is also coming to bother that king. King takes, queen e8, bishop c1, trying maybe to capture the knight, queen a4 check, king d2, and now we have knight takes on c4, and white's position is collapsing. The game continued with knight takes on c4, knight takes, king e1, and now f5, trying to open some more files against the white king. Stockfish now goes for the queen exchange, and Leela happily accepts because white's position is hopeless. Now we have rook f8 threatening to take here, and if white takes here, then after g takes on f5, the g file opens up and the g2 pawn would fall pretty shortly. So instead, Stockfish went rook e1, and now we have rook h2, and if rook e2 to defend this pawn on g2, well, then after f takes e, there's rook h1 check, king c2, and rook f1, and white's position is completely hopeless here. After something like king b3, the knight can just simply go to b2, and if king a3, then there's knight d3, and this bishop is lost. After something like rook d2, black can just take the bishop and be a piece up. So this is no good. So after rook h2, instead of trying to defend this pawn on g2, Stockfish played here rook b3, which I'm not sure what it does really, but the game continued with rook takes here, rook e2, and now rook g1 check, king c2, rook h8, Leela is trying to double the rooks, king d3, knight b6, king c2 back, rook h1, bishop d2, and now f4, and Stockfish is really in a Zugzwang again. He doesn't have useful moves. The game continued now with rook takes on a3, and now king b7 to not allow this rook on the 7th rank. And Leela's idea is quite simply to advance the g pawn and create a passed pawn and win. And Stockfish can't do much about it, and here he played c4, giving up this pawn. We have knight takes, rook b3 check, king a6, king c3, and here Leela goes for a winning rook endgame by trading down. We have this check, rook blocks, they trade the rooks, and now we have rook f1 attacking that pawn, rook c3, g5, and this is just quite simply a winning endgame. White can't do really much here. And the winning plan here is quite simple. First of all, if this king is ventures too far away from the pawn, then rook f2 wins it down. And other than that, Leela wants to play king b5 and play c4, king c5, and then give a check with the rook, force the king back to the first rank, and then invade with the king through d4 or b4. Stockfish preferred to lose the a pawn with king d2, and now we have this check, king e1, rook takes on a2, and now rook b3. Stockfish is trying to cut off the black king, but he can't maintain the rook on the b file, because after king a7, king f1, rook h2, this rook is coming to h3, and then black will play g4, and this pawn is pinned to the rook. And something like king g1, rook h3, king g2 doesn't help, because g4 still works, and after the rook moves something, there's rook takes on f3, and if the rooks are exchanged, then this is just a winning pawn endgame. So after rook h2 here, Stockfish played rook a3 check, allowing the king back into the game, rook a8, king b5, rook d8, rook h6, and here Leela's idea is now to march the king to d4 and then play g4 to weaken the e4 pawn, and then just take down these pawns. The game continued with rook b8 check, king c4, rook e8, king d4, king g2, g4, f takes, king takes on e4, king f2, rook h2 check, king g1, rook d2, and Leela prefers to take the d pawn with the rook, and her advantage is just quite simply massive here. She is winning now down also the g pawn, and here we go. The g pawn is lost soon. There you go. And from here on it's really easy now. You just have to push the pawns. And of course we are already familiar with her style and technique. And in this game she will give up all the pawns but the c pawn. She needs that to create a new queen, and then give that queen up, of course. And there you go. She only has now 2 pawns, and soon she will have only 1 pawn. And now the c pawn is happily marching to become a queen, but the rook takes it off, and here now we have the simple mate with the rook in a couple of moves here. Any second now. There you go. And in one more move, Leela mates Stockfish again. Another amazing game from Leela. It looked like she's taking a lot of risks and that she might be in danger, but I think she calculated it all through, and she just saw that Stockfish doesn't have anything on the b file and that she can just quite simply attack on the king side. Please subscribe, like and share, and check out some of the other games. Thanks for watching and see you soon. Take care.